Bluetooth during the Viking Age was more powerful than its modern predecessor. That's because Bluetooth, the Viking king, he's the one who connects us all. Before wireless earbuds, before smartphones, before your smart fridge could talk to your smart toilet, there was a Viking king. He didn't have the same technology that you have. He didn't stream Spotify, he didn't play Pokemon Go. But he did unite warring tribes, had a Bluetooth, and left behind a legacy so powerful, it's literally in your pocket right now. His name, Harald Bluetooth. And after you hear the real story, you won't just connect the dots between Viking warlords and wireless technology. You'll never look at your Bluetooth icon the same way again. Spoiler alert, it's ancient runes. Seriously. In this episode of Viking Legacy and Lore, we're bringing together the influence of Vikings on modern life and powerful lessons that we can learn from leaders that have clearly left their mark centuries later. This is the saga of King Harald Bluetooth, a man whose life was filled with war, diplomacy, religious upheaval, and some serious dental drama. In this episode, you'll learn exactly who Harald really was and why this bearded, axe-wielding monarch, he matters more than your earbud pairing issues. You also find out why his conversion to Christianity wasn't just a spiritual shift, it was political TNT for the Viking Age. We'll also touch on how Bluetooth technology got its name from a guy who had zero interest in apples or droids. But he did manage to sink an entire kingdom. And when I say sink, I mean unite. And we're just warming up. We're going to walk through the legendary trial by fire miracle that helped seal Harald's fate and faith. By the end, you might just realize that building real human connections across divides, through traditional barriers, and even through awkward Zoom calls isn't just a modern challenge. It's existed for centuries. But uniting, connecting, well, that is a true Viking virtue. So grab your horn of mead and your overpriced coffee and your $50 Yeti mug, because it's time to discover how a dead tooth and a legendary Viking king lives on in ways you didn't even know. Harald Bluetooth was born around 935 AD, the son of King Gorm the Old. His father Gorm is remembered as the first real king of Denmark, a serious, stubborn man who stayed loyal to the old gods. His mother Thyra was just as famous. Old writers called her Denmark's adornment, and they remember her as wise and forward-thinking. Harald was born into a Denmark that wasn't yet a real country. The borders changed often, tribes fought constantly, and nearby kingdoms like the Holy Roman Empire to the south and the Norwegians to the north wanted more control over the region. Harald inherited a crown, but it was more of a dream than a stable throne. His kingdom was held together by fear, loyalty, and the strength of the axe. Harald's early life was sharpened by challenges. When Gorm died around 958, Harald became king. But it didn't mean everyone followed him. Local rulers were proud and didn't like being told what to do. On top of that, foreign powers like King Otto of the Holy Roman Empire, they were looking to move in and take advantage. The Germans, the Saxons to the south, they wanted more land and more Christians. Harald couldn't hold Denmark by force alone. He had to use smart diplomacy and sometimes even submission to keep peace and stay in power. Harald was clever. He knew when to fight and when to talk. Around 970, he even pushed Danish control into parts of Norway. But it wasn't easy. Rivals from the north, they fought back and even made Harald retreat more than once. Still, for a short time, a united Denmark-Norway existed under Harald's name. Harald played the long game. He used buildings, laws, and big symbols to hold his people together. Unlike many Viking kings known only for fighting, Harald left behind things you can still see today. Bridges that he built, some of the first large wooden bridges in Denmark. One of these bridges was almost 250 meters long. They weren't just for crossing rivers, they were for connecting the land and his kingdom together. Harald also built huge forts and fortresses, and you can still see them today. They were built with careful planning, not by random warriors. These were forts that showed Denmark had a strong, smart ruler behind them. Harald knew when to use peace and when to use power, to reward and to threaten. If a local jarl joined him willingly, they received gifts and support. If they refused, they risked war with Harald. He knew that sometimes kindness built loyalty and sometimes fear kept order. And then came the famous Christian missionary, Popo. So how did Harald become a Christian? That's the question. Why did he become a Christian? Let me just tell you, is still debated. But the most famous story involves a missionary named Popo. According to old books, we'll talk more about this in a moment, Popo was told to prove that he was God's messenger. He had to hold a red-hot iron in his bare hand. The test was simple. If he didn't get burned, his God must be true. In a room full of warriors, Popo held the glowing iron. He walked across the hall, and when he let go, his hands weren't burnt at all. Everyone gasped, and Harald, the story says, bowed his head and believed. Was this a true story? Was it real? Maybe. But historians think that it was probably politics that played a major role. Harald was caught between German Christian rulers to the south and pagan warriors to the north. Becoming Christian helped him earn favor with powerful neighbors and still hold on to his throne. Even if the miracle was exaggerated, the story gave Harald a way to bring Christianity to Denmark without losing honor. Harald is also responsible for creating the Jelling Stone, which is located today, you can still see it, in Jelling, Denmark. It's considered the birth certificate of Denmark, and it was to show what he had done. Harald carved this stone with runes, and it says, King Harald ordered this monument made in memory of Gorm, his father, and Thyra, his mother, that Harald, who won for himself all Denmark and Norway, and made the Danes Christian. The stones even have a picture of Jesus with his arms outstretched on the cross on one side. Today that stone still stands next to the burial mounds of Harald's parents. Historians call it Denmark's birth certificate. The moment the country became a united kingdom, under one king, under one law, and one faith. Harald knew that Denmark needed to stand strong or be taken apart by strong powers. By carving his name in stone, he made a bold claim. This land is one. These people are one. And the faith, it is now Christian. The stone has lasted longer than Harald, longer than his dynasty. 1,000 years later, it still reminds us the power of unity, of vision, and belief. So why was he called Harald Bluetooth, the name that would echo through 1,000 years? Why the name Bluetooth, this name that would echo through thousands of years and continues on today, whether people even realize its origins or not? In Old Norse, his nickname was Blatan, literally meaning blue tooth. Medieval writers say that Harald had a blue tooth, or a tooth that had turned dark. And most people think it was probably from an injury. It could have been a disease or decay. Others say maybe it was a battle wound that left the root blackened. Whatever the reason, it definitely stood out. And this was a time when warriors had all kinds of nicknames. Forkbeard, Fair Hair, Blood Axe, and now Bluetooth. What started as an insult or maybe a jab became a badge of honor. And 1,000 years later, tech companies decided to use this very name to represent wireless connection. Even the Bluetooth logo is made by combining Harald's initials from ancient Viking runes. It's like a digital gelling stone, etched not in rock but across every device in your pocket. There's something important about Harald that most people don't talk about, not even in history class. His reign wasn't just about crosses and carvings. It was about pulling everyone together. Before Harald, Denmark was a land of scattered tribes. Chiefs ruled their own corners and only helped each other when it suited them. But after Harald, Denmark became a true kingdom, with roads, forts, a real army, and even early taxes. Yes, he brought Christianity, but he also brought order. Some historians say Harald's greatest gift wasn't religion, It was vision that united people. He didn't just fight battles, he built the system and symbols that gave Denmark its strength. And because of that, later kings were able to rule mighty empires. Without Harald's bridges, forts, and bold ideas, there may have never been a North Sea empire at all. Even with all his big ideas, Harald's story doesn't end with a win, but it ends with betrayal. His own son turned against him. Some say Harald died in battle around 985, wounded and forced to run, only to die soon after on the island of Wollin in what is now Poland. Others think that he lived longer, hiding far from home. Old stories, they don't agree. Go to the churchyard in Jelling today and you can still see what he left. A great stone, worn by 1,000 winters. Still it stands, his message still carved in it. Denmark had its beginning. And between the hammer and the cross, between father and son, Harald's story still speaks through time. Real unity always comes with a cost. Harald Bluetooth's baptism wasn't just a personal choice, it changed Denmark's path. It was a quiet moment that helped shift the whole Viking world. Many historians see it as one of the first signs that the Viking Age was beginning to end. Baptism and the cross. The old stories don't all agree on why Harald was baptized. Some say it happened in Germany, others say it was in Denmark, maybe near Jelling. But they all agree on the moment. A king who once wore Thor's hammer now bowed before the cross. He would build churches in Danish lands and welcome Christian teachers to baptize his people. Why did he do it? Maybe Harald truly believed. Maybe he was moved by the stories of Jesus' miracles or by the famous tale of Popo, the priest who held that red-hot iron to prove his faith. But Harald was also a ruler. He knew faith could be powerful. By becoming Christian, he didn't just find salvation, he found legitimacy. To the south, the Holy Roman Empire, ruled by Otto I and later by Otto II, it was strong, and staying a pagan king made him a target. Becoming a Christian king made him an equal. Christianity also gave Harald a way to bring his people together, to unite them. Paganism in Denmark was messy. Some people worshiped Thor, others Odin. Each valley had its own sacred sites, but Christianity was united. One God, one church, one ruler. If his people followed the same faith, they might follow his throne more closely too. And then there was the money. Christian Europe was linked by trade networks. Merchants from Saxony, Flanders, even Italy, they trusted Christian lands more than pagan. With baptism, Harald gained access to the coin, to the markets, to new alliances. For a kingdom between the Baltic and North Seas, that was a big deal. But Harald's plan for unity backfired. His son rebelled. He remained loyal to the old gods. To him, his father's baptism felt like giving in, like handing power over to foreign leaders and betraying the ways of their ancestors. Many Viking warriors agreed. They still believed in Thor's hammer. To them, Christ was a southern god, weak and strange. Civil war broke out. Battles burned across Jutland and Zealand. Harald was badly wounded and fled into the island of Wollin, or so they say. Strangely enough, his son, who once fought to protect the old gods, would later become Christian too, and maybe even more influential in that way. Harald's choice to become Christian changed Denmark forever. I'm going to tell you why I think it matters the most. Christianity helped bring everyone under one system, one ruler, one God, one law. The cross became the symbol, a symbol of a stronger kingdom. The Holy Roman Empire was still a very strong force in Europe. Harald's baptism let him deal with them king to king, not like a pagan outsider. This meant better trade for the Danes. Christian merchants trusted other Christians, and during Harald's reign, Denmark saw a wave of new goods, silver coins, jewelry, wine, silk. Instead of stealing wealth through raids, Denmark now earned it through its market. Denmark was the first Viking country to become Christian, truly Christian, and it became the starting point for the rest of Scandinavia. From Denmark, Christian missionaries were sent north into Norway. One Viking king, Olaf, had been a raider. He returned home baptized. And as the story goes, he told everyone to convert to Christianity, and he didn't ask nicely. He burned temples and he gave people two choices, baptism or death. Sweden remained pagan for a long time. But slowly, Christianity influence spread, thanks to the pressure from Denmark and Germany. And so just to give you a quick overview of how this all took place, Denmark under Harald Bluetooth around the 960s converted to Christianity. Then it was in Norway with Olaf from 995 to about 1000. Norway had a huge conversion moment. And then Sweden slowly converted from the 1000s to the 1100s. And then it continued to spread into the neighboring places outside of Scandinavia like Iceland. And so in the year 1000, they all converted. They even voted on it. Greenland, around the same time, Leif Erikson brought Christianity to that giant island. And what I want to point out is that is the reason why every Scandinavian flag today has a cross on it. It all started with Harald's baptism. The North, once ruled by Viking gods, is now marked by the sign of the cross. And whether it was by peace or by force for political reason, or it was genuine faith, the reality is Harald Bluetooth, he spread Christianity through Scandinavia and beyond. Harald built churches, carved stones, and he preached unity. But even with kindness, he lost his throne in the end. Other Viking kings, they weren't so gentle. As we mentioned, Olaf, he forced people into rivers to be baptized. He even burned temples and punished anyone who refused the new faith. And in Norway, there was another Olaf who became king, and he kept that theme going. He ruled with an even harder hand until he was killed in battle in 1030. Here's something to ponder. A lot of people think that the Vikings' conversion to Christianity led to the end of the Viking Age, but what if Harald Bluetooth hadn't become a Christian when he did? Denmark may have been invaded by the Holy Roman Empire. Otto the Great, he was powerful, and he was eager to expand his territory. Without Harald's baptism, things might have looked a lot different. With a pagan ruler, Otto would have had no problem invading Denmark and taking the land for himself, thus maybe even ending the Viking Age sooner than it did. And we may not even have Denmark as we know it today. We definitely wouldn't have had the gelling stones, and maybe even limited raids into England from that point on. There would have been no Canute the Great to rule Scandinavia and the British Isles. There would be a lot of things that would have changed if Harald hadn't been baptized. So it's quite possible that Harald's salvation was actually the salvation of Denmark. Now, next time you see a cross on a Scandinavian flag, remember, it's more than a symbol of faith. It was a symbol of survival. A moment ago, we touched on the famous story, the one where the missionary came and held the glowing piece of iron in his hands, that moment that helped turn Harald Bluetooth from a Viking king into a Christian ruler. But I want to take a quick look at that story and what really happened, what might be legend, and why it still matters today. Here's how the story goes. Sometime in the 960s, Harald Bluetooth had a problem. He was the king of Denmark. His rule was not secure. Many Viking leaders still followed the old god. Some thought Christ was weak and definitely a foreign god. German rulers to the south were pressuring Harald to become a Christian, but he needed proof, not just for himself, but for his people. He wasn't going to believe in something that wasn't real, and he certainly wasn't going to encourage his people to do the same. That's where Popo came in. He stepped forward. The warrior leaders of Denmark, they didn't care about words. They believed in trial by fire. They wanted to see a test to prove it. So they challenged Popo. Carry this red-hot iron in your bare hands. If God is real, then you won't be burned. Well, that night, they filled up the hall. They packed it tight. Torches burned. The iron was pulled from the fire, glowing hot. Everyone expected Popo to scream and to fail. But Popo prayed. He picked it up with his bare hands. He walked across the hall, holding the red-hot iron. The smell of smoke, it was in the air. When he put the iron down, his hands were unburned. There were no blisters, no wounds. The hall went silent. And as the story records, Harald, at that moment, bowed his head and said, "This is the true God." Now, it sounds like something from a Viking saga, but did it really happen? See, the story comes from old Christian books written by church leaders. They wanted to show that miracles proved Christianity was true. But historians today, they like to point out that there's no Danish record of Harald's time in this trial. The people who wrote the chronicles and these stories were Christians, so it's hard to see them as neutral players. But then again, during the Viking Age, written history on the Viking side was very uncommon. That's why things like the Jellingstone are so important, because it's literally written history. But there's so few words there that we have to imagine the rest. So it is possible that the story is true, but it's also possible that it was made up or dramatized. And to be honest, the reality is we'll never know for sure. But what we do know is that the story spread. It spread to the Danish people. It's been talked about as the moment that the king became Christian. And we know from history that it kept going, it kept spreading, and it continued through all of Scandinavia and beyond. So, it had an impact one way or another. I would love to hear your thoughts on whether it's true, whether it's not true, whether miracles are real or miracles are just made up for convenience. Tell me your thoughts in the comments, start a conversation, just keep it cordial. Now, over 1,000 years later, Bluetooth would have his name resurrected. In the late 1990s, engineers from Intel, Nokia, and Ericsson, they wanted to solve a problem. They were trying to make computers, phones, and other devices talk to each other wirelessly. But each company had its own way of doing things, and no one could agree on an exact method. That's when one engineer from Intel, he got the idea. He'd just been reading a book about Viking history, not because he was Scandinavian, but because it was interesting. The story of Harald Bluetooth stood out, a king who united different tribes into one kingdom. This engineer thought, that's exactly what we're trying to do, unite technology. So they gave the project a code name, Bluetooth. At first, it was just a placeholder, a temporary name, a secret identity for this project. But the name stuck. And just like Harald's kingdom, the technology wasn't perfect at first. Devices wouldn't always connect. Systems seemed to clash. It took time, effort, teamwork, and eventually it did work. And when it was time to launch, they kept the name Bluetooth to honor the king who brought people together. And again, even the logo has a secret Viking twist. It's made from two old runes, the Viking letters for H and for B. Harald Bluetooth's initial. Put together, they make the Bluetooth symbol. It's modern, it's simple, but it's Viking to the core. Today, Harald Bluetooth's name is everywhere. It's in your phone, your earbuds, your smartwatch. Every time you turn on Bluetooth, his initials light up in your pocket. Few medieval kings have left such a surprising legacy. And here's something even cooler. Bluetooth's technology mirrors Harald's life. Both brought different groups together. Both had setbacks and challenges. Both became part of something much bigger. So here's a lesson. Unity, it's not always easy, whether it's tribes of people or technology. Bringing things together takes vision, patience, and courage. And just like Harald, the story doesn't stop there. Because up next, we're going to explore what his choices meant, not just for Denmark, but for the future of all the North. His decisions, they still echo across Europe today. When Harald Bluetooth carved his name into the stones at Jelling, he wasn't just bragging about winning battles, he was sharing a dream. The Viking tribes who used to fight each other could stand together. He believed the future didn't belong to people who stayed divided, but to those brave enough to unite. That's the center of the story. Connection. The real legacy of Harald Bluetooth isn't wireless. It's a reminder. Connection is what makes us strong. Connection isn't just for data and devices, it's for people. We need connection. We need each other. We need a team of loyal friends, people who've got our back, people who will walk through the fire with us. So make those connections. We need people around us, surrounding us, friends to laugh with, people to help carry the load. What we need, what we want, what we're really after is genuine connection. It's not about likes and followers. It's about real connection. Someone who knows your name, someone who cares, someone who looks forward to what you're going to say because it matters and it speaks to them. That was one of the ideas behind this podcast, is to create a community where Viking fans can come together and talk and share the principles, the things that they've gleaned, share it on YouTube in the comments, on Facebook in our group. Look, the Viking journey is real. Even though the Viking age has ended, there's so many of us that can learn so much from the Vikings, the principles that they live by, the honor code, their desire to adventure, to explore, to build kingdoms and empires and trade networks. It's all there for us if we're looking. And let's share together. Let's share and make those connections and tell each other what we found in these episodes and what we found as we've read the sagas. Share and do your part. You can share your thoughts in the YouTube comments. You can post on the Facebook page. You can join our Discord. We are there to connect with you. Harald Bluetooth United Kingdoms. So what if you could help connect people with each other? Every time you talk with someone, every time you send a message, every time you share your thoughts and your insights and start a conversation online, you're starting to develop those connections. But the key is, do it with kindness, do it with gratitude, do it with connection and unity in mind. Will this comment produce unity? Will it take us a step closer to connection? Or is it a comment that will drive people apart? Because if that's the case, then it's not necessary, because what we desire is to connect. So make sure that when you post, when you comment, that it's done with kindness and care. We've even seen how connection completely changes lives in the course of entire nations. So that's the power that we have right here, right now. I'll leave you with this final thought. Strength comes from connection. Legacy comes when we stand together. And if we believe that, if we actually live that out, then this story isn't just history anymore. It's our story. It's your story. And so if something in this episode stirred your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Leave a review. Send it to someone who needs to hear it, because that's the point of Bluetooth, and that's the point of this podcast, to share the stories and to make connections. The stones Harald raised still stand, the runes still speak, and now it's your turn. So step out, build bridges, forge connection, and let your story echo. Until next time, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.